Associate of the Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies. And this webinar series is entitled The State of the Trade Union Movement in a Period of Flux. And it's really put on behalf of Labor Week 2020. And as a part of our Labor Day commemoration 2020 at the college, this webinar will focus on the role of credit unions towards impacting working people and consequently the trade union movement. This evening's webinar is entitled Two Sides of the Same Coin, Trade Unions and Credit Unions. And really, I'm really pleased to be joined this afternoon by some masters of industry, if I may be allowed to refer to them as that. We have Mr. Joseph Remy, who is the president of the Co-operative Credit Union League of Trinidad and Tobago. We have Mr. Hayden G.S. Blades Jr., who is the president of Business Inside Limited. And we have Mr. Winston Fletcher, who is the president of the Jamaica Cooperative Credit Union League. So I would like to say good afternoon to the presenters. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon to you, Colin. Good afternoon to your viewers and listeners.
Great.
It's a pleasure once again.
Yes, it's really a pleasure to have you all here as well. So we just want to bring into perspective the discussion this afternoon. And of course, it's entitled Two Sides of the Same Coin, Trade Unions and Credit Unions. And we're really happy to have persons who have traversed both fields and really can bring some life to the discussion here this afternoon. And in demonstrating the format this afternoon, how the presentations will be put forward, each presenter will be given 15 minutes to deliver their presentation. And within that 15 minutes, they will deliver their presentation uninterrupted. Thereafter, I will introduce the second speaker, then the third speaker, and immediately after that, we will be fielding questions from the participants. Now, feel free to type your questions in the chat area of the YouTube box, in the YouTube chat box. And of course, feel free to like, feel free to subscribe, and feel free to share. So you will have the opportunity to ask the panelists and the presenters questions after they present when we go into the question and answer segment. So first of all, opening the batting order this afternoon, from Trinidad and Tobago, we have Mr. Joseph Remy. And as I introduced him earlier, he is the president of the board of directors of the Cooperative Credit Union League of Trinidad and Tobago, a post which he has held since 2013. He's also the vice president of the board of the Caribbean Confederation of Credit Unions, known as CCULTT. But he also wears another hat. He's the president of the Federation of Independent Trade Unions and NGOs, known as FITON. In addition to that, he is a member of the National Productivity Council, appointed as a representative of the trade union movement, and he's also a member of the National Tripartite Advisory Council, NTAC, which is a body comprising government, business, and labor. So, without further ado, I'd like to invite Mr. Joseph Remy to open the innings for us here this afternoon. Mr. Remy, the floor is yours.
Thanks much, Colin, and thanks much to the Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies for doing a wonderful job at the advent of COVID-19. And, you know, we always say out of adversities come great opportunities. And this is one instance that we have had a very great opportunity to share the expertise of the college with the wider Caribbean region. And I think this is really a very good step for Cipriani College and for the Caribbean labor movement and for the Caribbean cooperative movement, that we could engage in such discourse that could take us to a different place. And this afternoon session, I want to also pay homage to my two fellow presenters this afternoon. Winston Fletcher, who serves as the president on the Caribbean Confederation of Credit Unions, the board that I belong to, and also Comrade Hayden Blades. We go way back in terms of collaboration in trade union business and credit union business, and I think Hayden Blades is very apt to bring some value to this presentation this afternoon. So again, welcome to the two other presenters, and to Colin, the moderator, and to the management and staff on the board of the Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies. I remember serving there as chairman for a period 2010 to 2014, and it really was a distinct pleasure. To me, that was the pinnacle of my career in terms of trade union and credit union activities, and it gave me an opportunity to see the labor and the cooperative education perspective and the role that it could play in the development of these two very noble movements. And this afternoon's presentation is very apt in that I am confident, and I have always said that it's the same coin. We're supposed to be singing from the same hymn book. We might be on different pages, but both movements have been birthed out of the same kind of historical context. And as such, it is important that we recognize the collaboration that is supposed to exist between these two movements. So I will want to begin my presentation by thanking everyone and, looking forward to the intense discourse that we are going to have this afternoon, because I believe it is going to be very rich in terms of value, and it is going to bring some perspective to the whole issue. So it's my presentation on the Elma Francois Institute of Research and Debate webinar, 26th of June, two sides of the same coin, trade unions and credit unions. And basically, you see how valuable the coins are. We are golden. And I say, one, the trade union brings to the heart of the movement. That we fight to ensure that there is that justice for workers at the job site, their improvement in their terms and conditions. And we go broader than that, out of the four corners of industrial relations, and look at the wider national community in terms of ensuring that there is a particular kind of social justice. And because you subscribe to what we call the Butlerite tradition of trade unionism, we go beyond. Butler would not have just fought for terms and conditions. Adult franchise and all those things would have been part of the work that he would have done on behalf of the trade union movement. And on the other side, the credit union movement, coming out of the cooperative movement, the credit union movement was the financial arm of the cooperative sector that brought to bear the economic development of those workers who would have taken the effort to struggle for improved terms and conditions and would have been left out of the mainstream of the financial sector. And as such, they would have pooled their resources collectively in what we call in the trade union movement in solidarity with each other, and develop a financial base that has now birthed a credit union movement that is regional and global and has a very, very deep penetration in a lot of the Caribbean islands. So this is where we would want to start this afternoon, and I would just want to go briefly on the purpose and the role of trade unions because of the time that we have allocated. And a trade union really is an organization of employees associated beyond confines of one enterprise. And we have examples in Trinidad and Tobago, the Oilfield Workers Trade Union, the Communication Workers Union. The Communication Workers Union was birthed out of the telephone industry, and it has mushroomed to represent workers in the hotel industry and in some of the other manufacturing industries. So it was birthed out of that, and it has established a protecting and improving through collective action. And the underlying thing here is improving through collective action the economic and social status of its members. It's really an organization that is run by a bottom-up democratic process, charged with the responsibility to further and defend the interests of workers by negotiating fair terms and conditions of work on their behalf, securing benefits, networking, organizing and mobilizing them. And it really acts as a lobby and campaign for legislative and political change. Remember, I spoke earlier that we don't limit ourselves within the four walls of industrial relations, but we go beyond in the walls of industrial relations and talk about the political role. And on the flip side of the coin, the purpose of credit unions and the role. Financial cooperatives established as on a not-for-profit basis and run by its members, again, bottom-up democracy, run by its members and shareholders with a common interest, people helping people. And the establishment of credit unions was with the aim of helping its members through promotion of savings and thrift, while providing avenues for credit and other financial and social services at favorable interest rates. And again, social services and not just the financial part of it. Credit unions go deeper than just providing financial support. Again, it operates with a bottom-up democratic organizational structure, and it is grounded on the principles. And there are 7 guiding principles that the cooperative movement adhere to and subscribe to. And they are: 1, the open and voluntary membership, democratic member control, members' economic participation, autonomy and independence, education, training and information. And you will see that one in particular stretches across, links across the both movements. And I would say it penetrates the coin itself. It goes from side to side because it's a critical thing of education, training and information. Cooperation among cooperatives, that is the solidarity part. That is the link with solidarity that we have in the trade union movement, and concern for your community, which is very critical in terms of the credit union movement. The commonalities of purpose between both movements. And I wanted to quote from a book here written by John Schaefer on the historical dictionary of the cooperative movement. The notion that trade unions and cooperatives have a natural affinity and should be part of a larger movement, growing part of the 19th century socialist theory. And it says a future worker state that has 3 mass movements. And you hear in the trade union movement is a common term, we refer to the mass movement. That is when we organize and mobilize movements, workers across the different political divide. So it is based on a worker political party, trade unions, and cooperatives. He was very clear to define that those things are intrinsically linked, right? And we know now that people may not accept that notion, and they believe that trade unions and cooperatives have so much in common that they should make common cause in building a better future. And we are saying that is what is the thread that holds us together, because what we are looking for is a better future for humankind, and that has remained influential up to today. I'm very clear on that. We go on into some of the commonalities again, and Schaefer went on to say, and this is very profound, the two have common roots as organized reaction to the harsh conditions of industrialization, which gravely disadvantage industrial workers, farmers, and craftsmen. So on the basis of the being left out, as I said earlier on, of the mainstream economic system, workers had to fight for their rights, and credit union members had to form an organization to further their economic development. They are both organized on the principle of self-help, mutual aid, and unity as a way to achieve improved conditions for their members. They are democratic institutions, as I said again, in which all members have equal rights to make decisions determining organizational directions. They both represent organized system rather than isolated efforts at self-improvement. They are very well structured and organized. Credit unions have the annual general meetings that make the major decision on behalf of the institution, while trade unions have what they call their national convention or their general council. And it is about the amalgamation of the membership to make important policy decisions going forward. They collaborate with like-minded organizations at various levels in the society. You'll find that the linkages, the stakeholders that they relate with are very common in nature. They have a close nexus with civil society in terms of bringing together the values of the both movements going forward. And when we go further down to some of the common organizational characteristics, protection and promotion of members' economic and social interests, voluntary adherence and resignation, it's the member's choice to join and the member's choice to leave, democratic management and control. That is very important because, we have a lot of institutions that we don't see the trust from democracy. And in these movements, it is very pronounced in our operation. I talk about the education and training, which is critically important to both movements. And then the members' participation in the affairs and the running on the thing. And then the financial base of both institutions. A base one in the trade union movement is membership dues, while in the credit union movement is membership contribution towards shares to build the capital base of the institution. So those are the kind of common linkages that we see. In terms of Trinidad and Tobago's situation, the trade unions, they were formed from an industrial alignment. And again, we look at the OWTU, oil and gas sector, communication workers union, the telecommunication industry, the seamen and waterfront workers trade union, port workers, PSA, the Public Service Association, the public service workers, banking, insurance, and general workers union, the banking and insurance industry, and the steel workers union of Trinidad and Tobago, the iron and steel company. Those were the genesis of those trade unions. But look at the similarity in the credit union movement. We talk about in the oil industry. We have four major credit unions there. We have TechU, one of the largest in the region. We have Palaseco, which is a leading credit union under the league right now. Antilles Credit Union, which was born out of the Antilles Oil Company. And Zenith Credit Union, again, part of the oil industry. Telephone Workers, Textile and Consolidated Telephone Credit Union. They are all credit unions in the telecommunication industry. We have the Port Employees Credit Union, which is from the port. We talk about the cement and waterfront workers, the port workers. Public Service Workers Credit Union, PSCU, the public service workers. The Banking and Insurance Credit Union, Bank Employees Credit Union, and we have the Bank and General Workers Credit Union. And there are two credit unions that were booted out of the BIGW and that whole banking and insurance industry. And then we have the CCULTT Credit Union, another leading credit union coming out of the steelworkers industry. So we are seeing the natural linkages, you know what I mean, between the both movements, and that is of critical importance. And what would have been done in terms of credit unions supporting workers during economic challenging times? Credit unions are always the backbone of financial support to workers during period, particularly of strikes, lockout, and other workplace stoppages when workers' salaries are so impacted. You find that the natural linkage they have is to go to the credit unions for that financial support. And within recent times, the league had a partnership with the government to provide liquidity support to workers whose employment status was affected by the COVID-19 pandemic regulations. We talk about that. I spoke about that on an earlier webinar that was hosted by Cipriani's, and I want to say that that has been working well to provide that level of support. So what are the possibilities from this collaboration? You know, we have a well-informed and educated membership. We have numerical strength and common advocacy on issues, greater membership discipline, participation and loyalty, improved social and economic status of membership, and that leads to the improved standard of living, enhanced management skill within both movements, because the training and the development is done on an ongoing basis and is an integral part of the DNA of both movements, creation and preservation of jobs, formation, and that could be done through formation of workers' cooperatives, housing cooperatives, consumer cooperatives, and producer cooperatives, all funded by the credit union movement, which has the financial strength and the liquidity support to give them that kind of capital leverage. We talk about provision of support services to workers, such as health insurance, life insurance, and educational services, in particular through the Cipriani College of Cooperative Studies and Labor. And I'm saying that that is where the both movements should be working in tandem to promote the educational advancement of their membership. We have improvement in access to goods and services to workers, which I believe is very important, and the integration into the formal sector, but those in the informal sector. What we normally do, we bring them into the formal sector based on the work that we're doing. So in conclusion, Colin, you know, and to the wider listenership, I would want to say that I have recognized that both movements are two sides of the same coin. There is no differentiation between them in terms of their origin and their intent. They have traveled different paths that believe are all in the best interest of the advancement of the cause of workers. And what I believe that once we harbor that relationship and bring that collaboration to a point, then what we can achieve at the end of the day is a state which we all been yearning for all along, that respect all citizens, all workers, that respect trade unionists, and we want to see a cooperative commonwealth, you know, a commonwealth of cooperators around, you know, that will rally around a common cause, and a civil society institution which is built on principles of social and economic justice, equality, and democracy for all. You know, I am very confident, based on the fact that I have straddled the both movements, that the synergy that exists within the movement could be of tremendous benefit to Trinidad and Tobago and the wider Caribbean region. So, Colin, I want to thank the college, and, you know, this is where I would want to end my presentation. I think, you know, I will look at the questions and maybe respond accordingly as we go along. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Comrade Remy.
Thanks much.
Cooperator and trade unionist, and, you know, we really, I mean, that was a very rich presentation. The only thing about these presentations is that, you know, yes, the time, and, you know, the concentration, but there was a well-packed punch. And I know you drove a lot of sixes in that inning. So there will be a lot of talking points. So I thank you for that, Mr. Remy, Joseph Remy. You know, straddling both sides of the coin and, you know, really bringing a wealth of information to add to this evening's discussion. Next on the agenda, we have Mr. Hayden Blades Jr. And Hayden is currently the president of Business Insight Limited, a business consulting and economic research firm. And his clients, of course, include a number of employee-based organizations and credit unions. And he is really versed in the operations, both at the strategic and the operational level of credit unions, having done some time at a senior level at a credit union. Now, prior to this, he was a senior economist, the assistant general manager of the RBTT Financial Group, where he was charged with the responsibility of establishing an economic unit for the purposes of the group for critical information on the economics of the operation. And previously, he was also the manager in group risk management and the finance division of RBTT. And he is a seasoned commentator on matters of business, and you would know him very well from post-budget and pre-budget debates. So he is bringing his contribution this afternoon to the table. Coming up one down, we have Mr. Hayden Blades Jr. to really deliver in this innings where we are discussing two sides of the same coin, trade unions and credit unions. Hayden, the floor is yours. Turn it over to you, sir.
Colin, thank you. You took up 2 minutes.
All right, I will pay it forward then.
Of my presentation time. Anyhow, Comrade Remy, thank you so much for your presentation. And thank you for reminding us of not only the genesis of the labor union movement, but also the credit union movement, and of course their importance. But I have one important phrase: people empowerment. That's what this is about. It's about people empowerment. You see, we have understood in our colonial past, into our post-independence era, we understand the challenges that the working class folks have had to endure and overcome. The labor union movement and the credit union movement, the entire cooperative movement would have been key enablers to enhancing the quality of life of people across this region. But people empowerment, that is what this is about. How are we measuring people empowerment? I have about 5 points I want to raise very, very quickly. We see the credit unions and the trade unions as instruments of empowerment. We understand the trade unions helped working class people to gain free and fair access to the labor markets, to ensure their protection, to ensure their livelihoods and the sustainability of their livelihoods. We appreciate that. We see the importance of the credit unions granting our working class folk access to the capital markets of this region, protection from usury, protection from exploitation. This is what the credit union movement and the labor union movement is supposed to be all about. People empowerment. How do we measure people empowerment? What are we doing in terms of ensuring that these institutions are relevant to this 21st century environment in which we live? I was telling Colin the other day, yesterday or day before, I said, you know, Colin, a lot of our young professionals, a lot of our young tertiary graduates, in spite of their exposure to a world of knowledge, do not see, their first inclination is not to join a labor union. In fact, their first inclination is not even to join a credit union. That they see these retail banks as offering them better services. They see these retail banks as having a stronger branding to it. they prefer to belong to that brand rather than to belong to the brand of a credit union. Even at Ernst & Young, an auditing firm, we had a credit union established and it was well subscribed by the staff. And I can tell you, to this day, it serves the staff of that institution. But I can tell you, people empowerment, I think we may be losing our focus on what people empowerment really means today. What people empowerment really translates into when we attempt to measure it. I'll give you this one. Robert Kiyosaki, I don't know, you most likely know him. He wrote that book on Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And he also wrote a subsequent piece on called the cash flow quadrant. And he talked about the importance of the levels of economic participation, that people can attain different levels of economic participation in an economy. Yes, we ensure that people have jobs. That's the first step. So you are an employee. But we can also look at people graduating beyond simple employment to becoming self-employed professionals. And when I say professionals, I don't mean just simply doctors, engineers, and so on. I am talking about people who are vocational in nature and they are able to become self-employed electricians, plumbers, etc. So he talked about the movement from one level of participation in the economy to another level, and then to another level, and then to a fourth level. So you said we start at employee, you gain employment. The trade union is there to protect your employment, to protect your life, to protect your livelihood. But then why can't we shift further to becoming self-employed, or shift to becoming business owners, or shift to becoming investors? You see, my thesis is that our credit union movement and the labor union movement ought to be positioned to shift people to increasingly higher levels of participation in the economy, which is to say, we don't just simply assume that because we have a low level of unemployment that our job is done. That we should have worked harder to move people to higher and higher levels of economic participation in the economy. We should have positioned both the credit unions and the labor unions to help people to become self-employed persons, to help people to become business owners, to help people to become investors in their own right. And that these things, these activities, that is where we build a stronger and more resilient base for all Caribbean people. And I suspect that along the way, we may have rejected that hypothesis that we can be more than just employees. So my thesis this evening is that it is not only that labor unions are there to protect us from exploitation. It is not only that labor unions are there to protect us, to stand in the gap for the working class, especially when our democratic systems fail us, when our constitutions do not have the coverage to ensure that people are protected throughout their working lives. Look, in Trinidad and Tobago, we had the issue of Mittal Steel. And look at what happened to the workers at Mittal Steel. Mittal Steel, a global entity, shut its doors, sent home workers, and the workers had to protest, demonstrate. They had to write letters, hold meetings, come on morning shows, and demand their severance pay. Why? That should not have happened. Our democratic systems are flawed. And there are gaps in our governance system that really need to be filled. And our labor unions have done their part. They have advocated for legislative reform. They have worked with workers, organized workers for them to avoid the exploitation of unscrupulous employers. But yet, we are at a stage where these things are still incomplete. In other words, there is a lot more to be done by the labor union movement and the credit union movement to stand in the gap for the working class. I always argue with my father. He was on campus at St. Augustine during the late 60s and early 70s. He was there with Geddes Granger and so on. And I always tell him that the revolution is not complete. And we have these lively debates about what constituted the revolution. But I want to say to you, Colin, to the panelists, and to all the viewers today that this story is a story about people empowerment. And the trade union movement and the credit union movement are the two most important pillars to provide that foundation for people empowerment. But what we have to be challenged with today is how do we measure people empowerment? Do we measure it simply on the basis of an income per capita measure? Do we measure it on the basis of simply an unemployment measure? Do we measure it on the basis of a literacy rate? How do we measure people empowerment? Because I suspect that given the persistent poverty that still exists across this Caribbean region, we may not be measuring the right things. And there is more for us to do in order to lift our citizens out of this persistent poverty cycle. Great work has been done by the labor unions and the credit unions, but a great more has to be done to complete this task. People empowerment may very well include moving people from the employee status to self-employed status to business owner status to investor status. And I suspect that in some instances, we have seen some division across these movements. That what should have been collaborative work, at some points in time, there has been a separation of ideas. And members of various labor unions may have gone in slightly different directions, as well as credit unions. I want to make it clear to everyone that a credit union is not a bank. As Comrade Remy just explained, the credit union is fundamentally a democratic institution where the depositors, the people who invest their savings in the form of shares, that they are the owners. And by being owners, they have some say in the governance of the institution. The depositors in a bank, the depositors in a bank are just simply savers. They are not the owners of the bank. There's a separation between the investors in a bank and the actual owners of a bank. And that creates an entirely different governance structure, which means that you could be a depositor and have absolutely no say in how a bank is managed. Credit unions are intent on ensuring that through a democratic process, the people who save their monies there also have a say in how the institution is run. People may not know or need to be reminded that credit unions on an annual basis make an allocation to a reserve fund called the Education Reserve. And I think most credit unions across Trinidad and Tobago, according to our Cooperative Societies Act, most credit unions will make that allocation. The purpose of that Education Reserve Fund is to provide a different type of empowerment where members can have access to those funds in order to further their education. And the education does not necessarily always have to be academic-based education. It can be vocationally based education. But what happens, Colin, is that in many instances, our credit unions are not making the best use of those funds. And we have to get back to the point where we embrace one thing, people empowerment. We need to make our credit unions the institutions of empowerment that they must be. And one last thing, when you look at the balance sheet of a credit union and you assess their loan composition, guess which area of activity attracts most of the credit allocation by a credit union? Retail, consumer durables, maybe maybe an extension to a home. We need to do more than that. We need to be able to help people to appreciate that starting a small business may very well be one of the things that a credit union can assist you with. That's a different level of empowerment. Our credit unions are still constrained. They're still very constrained by the problems that they face in terms of issuing mortgages. Because of the very nature of credit unions, they don't have access to a lender of last resort. They cannot necessarily engage in maturity intermediation, which is to say they can't borrow funds on the short end and then lend it on the long end, because that creates a lot of liquidity problems for the credit union. And by now, we needed to have a system to solve that, where credit unions can be important sources of mortgage lending. In these small open economies where we have very shallow stock markets and bond markets and so on, the fastest way to accumulate wealth is via real estate. And our credit unions need to play a better role, a more involved role in facilitating wealth accumulation. Wealth accumulation is not a bad thing. I know when we talk about these issues, we sometimes associate them with evil capitalism. But I can tell you this, until we get to the point where we encourage the economic participation of our membership in the economy, where credit union members can bid for government contracts and win government contracts by virtue of the support that they get from a credit union, that is the kind of people empowerment that these twin institutions can achieve. Thank you.
Wow. What a middle order there. Thank you very much for that, Eden. A very spirited presentation, very in-depth, and I mean, it was really built robustly around the theme of people empowerment. And I think that is at the heart, at the substance of what we are really looking to accomplish here this afternoon with our discussion. So I really appreciate the contribution, Eden. And I know but when discussion time comes around, I hope you're ready to to receive the many googlies that may be coming your way. Thank you very much, sir. And as the closing batsman, you know, as he takes the walk to the center pitch, I will just introduce Mr. Winston Fletcher. Now, Mr. Winston Crosby Fletcher, he is the president of the Jamaican Cooperative Credit Union League. And he's also the president of the Caribbean Confederation of Credit Unions, while also serving as the chairman of the Caribbean Credit Union, Fund Management Company Limited, which is a subsidiary of the Jamaica Cooperative Credit Union League. Now, he's a career professional and contemporary thought leader in the areas of strategic management that traverses the discipline of engineering, manufacturing, and education and training, specializing in TVET, which is technical vocational education and training, and workforce development. And you know, he also consults in the area of labor market analysis and workforce development. We are very pleased to have our brother in arms, Mr. Winston Crosby Fletcher, to bring his presentation to us here this afternoon. So Winston, without further ado, I turn the floor over to you, sir. You could unmute your mic and come on into the game, man.
Thank you, Colin. Good afternoon, fellow panelists, brothers and sisters listening in. I want to commend my two colleagues. Excellent presentations up top. Apologies for the technological glitch. But it's indeed my pleasure to participate in this tripartite, as it seems, discussion. Very, very rich discussions ahead of me, and I hope that I will be able to add some measure of debate to the process. So, two sides of the same coin. In Jamaica, we have a program on radio called Both Sides of the Story. Pretty much the same thing. So here we go. By way of context, colleagues, the World Economic Forum has for the last 10 or so years, but most recently about 2015-16, in a publication called The Fourth Industrial Revolution and the Future of Jobs, been predicting disruptive tendencies to the workplace. And they predicted that these disruptions would come mainly from technology. Now, that was consistent with a writer, Schumpeter's. He developed a model coming out of a theory called creative destruction, which is also speaking to technology and how the rapid changes in technology would have really radically changed society. Those changes, innovations, would have led to productive change, improved systems and processes that would lead to greater value creation at the level of the individuals, the organization, and communities, which in the final analysis would return net benefits to society. But then that planned disruption did not probably come on stream as we thought it would. Instead, what we had was COVID-19, and that had disrupted everything and has put us in what is now at the conference theme here, a state of flux, and has actually introduced some new normals. So, credit unions. What really are credit unions? I like to say that we are the epicenter of human and financial capital development. And it may sound like a cliche, but very much like a trade union movement. We are really a movement of the people, for the people, and certainly by the people. We are really an integral institution to the global financial infrastructure. We serve as a mechanism for financial capital formation and wealth creation at the local, regional, and international level. We're also a vehicle for social and economic empowerment and transformation. The business model, I believe, is a very powerful one and still a viable one in this age of capitalism, where this individualism is subordinated to collectivism. It promotes the ownership concept and this whole business of accountability at the level of the individual among the working class. Now, what are we as a movement? And I give you a synopsis. Apart from being the champions of the working class, if we look globally, what do we find? To the right of my screen, your left, you will see that the credit union movement globally sits across 6 continents in 118 countries. There are 85,000 credit unions with a membership of 274 million. And sit or presides over an asset base of $1.7 trillion. And that's in US currency. If we look to my left and your right, what we find at the regional level, that's CCCU. We are 17 countries, 212 credit unions, 2.4 million members. We have savings deposits amounting to 5.2 billion US and assets of about 6.2 billion, which equates to roughly 20% of the regional GDP. So the question was raised, 2 sides of the same coin. And I believe the answer is yes, from an advocacy and a governance oversight perspective. So as credit unions, our advocacy and governance oversight, we look at the legal and regulatory framework. And some of the big ticket items that we contend with now are the AML, CFT, FATF, IFRS, and so forth, and trying to get access to the clearinghouse. We also provide at the very base social inclusion for a vast majority of persons who have been locked out of the global financial system, and even at the local level, many of our brothers and sisters are locked out of the traditional banking system. So we prepare policy and strategy development to really look at our environment and how can we use those to drive our own participation. Sometimes it's a way of inviting ourselves to the table. So we seek to devise strategies and policies that will help us to exploit the market and mitigate the opportunities in the market and mitigate whatever threats they are. And so that's a credit union. When we look at the trade unions, they have their legal and regulatory responsibilities. They look over the labor laws and how they may affect the working class and agitate and advocate and so forth. Then in terms of the social inclusion, they are proponents of the whole convention and principle of decent work and all that comes with it, sustainable living conditions for working class people. And like us, credit unions, they also shape policies and strategies that will benefit their members from new trends and existing trends in the labor market so that their members can advance as society advances. Continuing to explore the both sides of the coin, we are people-centered and we're also democratically controlled. So while the credit unions look at the social and economic well-being from the standpoint of finance, thrift, that leads to capital formation and assets ownership, eventually wealth creation, we also, from another perspective, protect our membership from high interest rates and fees that are sometimes predatory in nature. Our brothers and sisters, on the other hand, the trade unions, they also have a socio-economic interest in seeing that towards the well-being of their members through the collective bargaining process that will also lead to the decent work we talk about. And they are very strict guardians of workers' rights to protect them from arbitrary actions and unfair treatment at the workplace and to advance their social advancement in the economic space. So, COVID has somewhat shifted the paradigm. And the argument is that when the paradigm shifts, everything returns to zero. And it's therefore a time to reset and recalibrate the compass, and I dare say, moral and otherwise. So, in truth, COVID has radically shifted the credit unions to a point of inflection. So we now stand at a crossroads. It's time to reset the compass, and it calls for a new mental model. It calls for a shift in the way of thinking and for new narratives at the level of leadership and even followership in order for us to pivot to the new normal of the future. And we're going to do that, we're going to do it well, through one of the cooperative principles and similarly of the trade union principles, also of training and education of our membership, which eventually would lead to the growth and sustainability. And with good governance and leadership, we will be able to preserve those and to also protect societies from externalities. So what has been the impact of COVID-19? Well, in short, it has been disruptive to our social and economic life, more so for the working class. Our members' ability to meet their savings and loan obligation have been significantly reduced because of furloughing of workers, there are layoffs, there are lockdowns, and all those things. From the credit union standpoint, our cash flows have been impacted. There have been a crunch on cash flows because of less ability to service loans and contribute to their saving objectives, which lead to a kind of tightening of liquidity. Like the trade unions, we also develop some competence in negotiations. And so we have been able to negotiate waivers and moratoriums for our members to help them through these difficult periods. The likely side effects, though, we're likely to see delinquency increasing. We're likely to see surplus diminishing, certainly reducing, and as a potential to erode capital. Just this morning, I was reading at the financials in Jamaica here. The outlook for non-performing loans, not good at all, in double digits for the last 3 months. So the signs are ominous, if that is anything to go by. So lessons learned. COVID is here and it seems gonna be with us for a long time. But one of the things that we have learned in the last 3 or 4 months, the ubiquity of technology has proved indispensable. And so when we started the year, I recall in one of my first meetings at the CCCU, I spoke to the role that technology will play going forward. Well, that was forced upon us because of COVID. The digitalization of product and service as a delivery mechanism or channel is going to be part of the key success factor going forward. Technology and the interrelationship with the technology and the future is big. Technology will be both an enabler and a facilitator. And we have to begin to think. We talk about the cost of technology, but it's like learning. People say, if you think education is expensive, try ignorance. We have to start look at technology as an investment and not a cost. We also found that the flexibility of our human resource, our staff, was a key success factor over this period and continues to be. Decentralization of the workforce, remote working has reduced concentration risk in terms of social distancing. But it also will teach us lessons as to how we need to really decentralize other aspects of our organization to protect us from major shocks. Critical among this also was the whole business of business continuity planning. So what are credit unions likely to look like post-COVID? I believe that it has kind of, shook us up in a way that we have to take notice, and credit unions, I dare say, will never be the same again, for the better. So we will be in the future dynamic, member-centric, innovative, and technology-enabled, empathetic, because a lot of empathy was shown in the last few months to our members, collaborative and strategically focused entities. We become more responsive in this new work order. Flexibility is going to be the game of the game. I believe, and I think Mr. Blades touched on that, credit union has a very serious responsibility. We speak about the value creation and the empowerment, but I think that's something that we have to become evangelical about, is what I call creating, building, developing a new entrepreneurial class, where we have to move our members from their base of risk aversion into the realm of risk-taking, meaning move them to become owners of capital and create real wealth for themselves and others. We also will in the future have the opportunity, this has really awakened us to the need to expand our network in order to increase our network. And again, that symbiotic relationship that naturally was formed with credit unions and trade unions, we need to now take hold of that in a very deliberate way and make the two things come together in a very big way, not for us individually, but for membership in creating this new working class that will move them up the value chain. So that way we'll create value at the individual level, the organizational level, and also for society, something that we hold dearly. We talk about the protection of and care for our community. And so in summary, colleague, the importance of the credit unions for all seasons, I believe, shone in the case of Jamaica, certainly, and I have no doubt it was the same across the Caribbean and across the globe during the pandemic. Our members called upon us, and I know from all indication and all the reports coming in, we have been caring, we have been empathetic in the process, we've been understanding. I hope we have generated so much goodwill in this process that in the final analysis, once things are settled, that exponential growth that we hoped for and projected, we will realize. Once again, we were tried, tested, proven as a reliable and trusted partner. And that said, all is left for me to do is to leave you with this quote. We are not for profit, we are not for charity, but for service. That's our mantra. Well, Henry Ford reminds us that a business that is absolutely devoted to service will have only one worry about profits, and that is they will be embarrassingly large. Ladies and gentlemen, the moderator, I thank you for listening. Until such time as questions, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Winston. Once again, a very insightful presentation. While you were presenting, I saw Hayden's hand going up into the air. I know I was looking to see if Soca Music was playing, but you know, I saw you responding positively. So I really thank you for that, Winston. You know, a lot of food for thought, and you know, it's a good point to get right into the questions. And you know, of course, contributions coming in, and we have a comments. You know, the spirited conversation, looking at the two sides of the same coin. And the first one, I want to go to Mr. Remy. All right, Mr. Remy, you know, we have a question coming from Natalie M, right, on our social media platform. And she is presenting a case and asking if the linkages between the two movements, the trade union movement and the credit union movement, do those linkages really increase participation of people in the whole democratic process and the empowerment process? Or she's presenting a counterpoint. Is it more so the few members who really become more deeply involved in both organizations, while the majority of members really take a hands-off approach? All right. Well, I was looking for Mr. Remy, but we have Eden here, so you could go ahead. You know, they're looking at the participation.
Colin.
Yes.
I understand exactly where she's coming from.
Yeah.
So I'll take a stab at it and then
and then Mr. Remy, yes.
Could jump in. I understand what she means by the level of participation of all the members in the various institutions. And I know she's alluding to the fact that sometimes on a board of directors at a credit union, you may find that a lot of the same names keep rotating on the same board. And I suspect that what she's referring to is the issue of getting more of the membership directly involved in leadership positions. That's what she's alluding to. And I would advise her to look at her, if she's a part of a credit union, look at the credit union's bylaws. And in those bylaws, there are term limits for members of the board. And every year there is an annual general meeting where there is sequential rotation of people off of the board and new persons are elected and so on. She has to get involved in that process in order to really participate. I know that in many instances, credit unions may not all be doing the best job at inviting people to be nominated for positions on the board. What you have to do as a member, get yourself nominated via the nomination committee and put yourself up to be a part of the credit union's management process, governance structure. Because if you don't come forward, nobody's really going to come looking for you. So you've got to come forward and be a part of the process, be a part of the governance structure, and look at your credit union from the inside. Many times members just simply go to the AGM to collect their dividend check. And this is the truth. And if some members, if they don't think that they're going to collect the dividend check at the AGM, they tend not to attend the AGM.
Yeah.
Okay, we're talking the truth today.
Definitely, we're speaking the truth.
So,
Yes.
so
Yeah.
I want to advise the listener, as long as you're a member of a credit union, get yourself involved, get yourself nominated by the nomination committee, participate at the AGM, get up and ask questions and get clarifications and so on, and demand that there are certain objectives that the credit union must achieve and so on, but you have to get involved if you want to be involved.
Definitely. Thanks so much for that response. Now,
Colin,
as I have, yes, yeah, Mr. Remy.
yeah,
Before
I
we
had a
take
little
it on,
challenge here. So I just want to thank Hayden for his response,
yeah,
and it was in line with what I was intended to say, and just to advise to that, one of the challenges we having with that member involvement is that we, our political system, we inherit this colonial system of a kingdom, so that one person would lead and give directions and everything. And you see the issue of collective leadership, participatory leadership, democracy at work to the fullest is something that I believe we have to go and re-educate our citizenry about.
yes,
Yeah,
And Hayden is right. People
yeah,
come to the AGM and the first thing that they do is they actually token and they turn to the back page of the brochure, because the
yeah,
back page has what the dividend is
and
about.
the dividends paid,
That's
yes,
right. And I'm saying we credit unions offer a myriad of educational programs to their membership. Hayden spoke to it about getting themselves involved at the leadership level. And every year, you will see on every papers, credit unions advertising for nominations, for sitting on
yes,
different boards and
yes,
committees and those things. They advertise their AGMs. But people have to start to see themselves as being leaders
yes,
and not being
yes.
followers and not being participators. And if we could change that mindset, then we will bring about a different kind of society, which is critically important.
yes.
Definitely, man. Thank you so much. Mr. Remy, one of the questions coming for you. All right, and it's coming out of the initial response, and that Natalie saying that it's really about mobilizing the entire membership. We have a question from George Bob.
Mm-hmm.
Let me put it in this way. All right, the two organizations, while completely distinct, they're still inseparable. So should there be work, or should we be working towards supporting this kind of relationship to build a participative economy? In England, one reporter saw out of England calling it the sharing and the collaborative economy. Can we, the working people of society, come together to really establish this, and how we should go about working it? I know you had some recommendations in your presentation, how you could go about doing that.
Thanks, Colin. And again,
Yeah.
it is instructive that we touching a sore point in the both movements, and it's something that I
Yeah.
have a peeve about for quite a while. And again, I go back to if and I heard Hayden and Winston in terms of taking it to the next level, getting the entrepreneurial drive and all those things. That is all well and good, but we have been brainwashed by education over the years to believe that we can't do it ourselves.
Yeah.
And because of that, we don't have confidence in ourselves to mobilize enough to put ourselves to that point. So we see education not just as a tool for building ourselves to own
Yeah.
these things. It is to get certification, to get a job, as Hayden said, to go back in employment, and not
Right.
about what education can do for us as a people to give you that economic and social independence as a people. And I think that is what we have. And that's why I'm saying that if we are not aware of the historical linkages and,
Yeah.
and, and how these things were formed and why they were formed, and what the purpose that the formation would have been driven by, people will just go through the normal stages. Look at Cipriani. I've been passionate when I was at Cipriani.
Yes.
How do we take the education that we are providing with those workers who are coming into the college and make the two institutions better institutions, the trade
Yeah.
union and the cooperative movement? How do we ensure at the end of the day, when people leave the college, they could make the country a better place, and they could lift the movement to a point, or lift the people to a point where they become entrepreneurs, owners of
Yeah.
capital? And we have to get away from the mindset in both movements that owning capital is an offensive thing.
Right.
Because of the people who own it now and their behaviors, we believe it's offensive, but it's not
Yeah.
an offensive thing. We have to see ourselves as being capable and better than them in owning and managing. Look at, as Winston said, the credit union movement regionally is sitting on millions of dollars. You know what I mean? We have been managing that very effectively and efficiently over the years. But why don't we transform that and have that translated into our people owning businesses and becoming employers? And because of the linkage with the trade union movement, having good terms and conditions of employment for our workers, because we understand what it requires to get them in a place of employment with decent work, as the ILO proposes. And those are the kind of linkages I would like to see. But people have to get involved. Must not see education as certification to just get a job. They must see it as a means of development and bringing about a different kind of society. And that is where I believe that members in both movements must see themselves as playing a more active role.
Yeah.
You can't change the leadership if you don't have people to vote to change the leadership.
Yeah.
And if the members to change the leadership, they have to participate, get involved in the activities of the credit union. And that's why I keep saying, I don't like to call them members. I call them shareholders. If we start to change the narrative, let them understand their value and their importance, and then they will participate more in the direction of the institution. That's what I would want to say at this time, Colin.
Thank you. Hayden, you wanted to have a feeling you want to add on that. Yeah.
Thank you, Colin. Let me tell you something, folks. The management experts say what gets measured gets managed. And I am at this stage in my career, in my life, where I recognize that we don't make progress sometimes because we are measuring the wrong things. In our credit union system, I know we use the CAMEL financial set of measures, capital adequacy and asset quality and management quality and so on. But I think we're at a stage now where we have to add measures that look at the progress we are making in terms of people empowerment. We have to get back to it. We have to define or redefine what people empowerment means in the 21st century. Now that we have come through the 1930s, we've come through World War I, World War II, we've come through the pre and post-independence era, the 1970s, we've had 1990. Here we are in 2020, and we are asking the same existential question: have we done enough? Have we done enough? And the answer to that question is still no. It will always be no until we get to the point where we can say the people of this region are significant owners of their commanding heights. Until we can get to that point and say we control, we own, we are able to decide the way forward, we don't have to rely on some multinational in the banking sector, in the energy sector, in the agricultural sector, in the tourism sector to decide for us whether they're going to build a new hotel or sell this bank or close down this steel mill. We need to be in charge of that. We need to be in charge of how we position ourselves with regard to how the global economy is evolving. As it stands, the multinationals are the ones who still make those decisions for us. And if they are not making the decisions for us, they are encouraging the politicians to make those decisions in a particular way to suit them, not us.
So true.
So here we are. This is our existential moment. How are we going to move forward? The answer is in answering the question, people empowerment. How do we measure that? How do we measure people empowerment in the 21st century? And yes, we are back to the same issue that came up so often in the pre-independence era and in the post-independence era. Who owns the commanding heights of our economies?
Yeah.
Because look, you listen to Barbadians complain about how this particular group of people, they own all the retail stores. In Trinidad and Tobago, we have had a recent falling out with a so-called group of people that we now collectively call the 1%, which I find very, very unattractive. But all across the region, we are having these discussions now about who is in control, who is really in control. we are debating campaign financing because we have suddenly discovered that campaign financing can influence the policymakers in office. So now we're concerned about where's the campaign financing coming from so that we can determine and decipher upfront who might be calling the shots. We are missing the fundamental point. Trade unions and credit unions are critical institutions of people empowerment, and we need to start measuring the right things that point us. Okay? All right.
Definitely. Thank you so much. And I want to shoot this question to Winston. So people are asking about, all these suggestions that the panel is making. How can the credit union movement, I know your background is in terms of that workforce development and labor marketing analysis, but how can the credit union movement help their members to develop their technological capacity to drive existing and new entrepreneurial pursuits? In your presentation, you spoke to this entrepreneurial class that the credit union can develop. So how can credit unions help their members to develop the capacity technologically and otherwise to drive their entrepreneurial pursuits? Winston.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for that question, Colin. Excellent question. I think that both parties are excellently positioned to achieve just that. The ILO like to speak about a tripartite approach to development, where it links labor with capital and government. Now, we are neither government in this respect nor capital, but the trade unions and the credit unions have the membership base that within each of our jurisdictions, certainly in the Caribbean, I know, there is a thing called TVET, the technical and vocational training, that has an entrepreneurial base to it. That not only teaching people to solve technical problems, but teaching people how to do things and develop ideas to bring them to fruition in products and services.
Yeah.
I think there's an excellent mechanism that sits in the case of Jamaica and in the case of Trinidad, name any Caribbean island. There's a national training agency that works very closely with trade unions and the credit unions too. In some work closer in some respect. I think that tripartite arrangement where the credit union has the financial outlay, the trade union can bring the working class to the table, and the TVET people can help them with that entrepreneurial training to gel the skills and to develop the skills into something that can be unleashed. So I think that is a practical solution to that. But I think I want to say something else, is that as leaders, we find ourselves in a privileged position to really make change. That's what leadership is about. We are really the fulcrum of organizational change. We make or we break organizations. And so, even going back into the question that Brother Remy and Hayden so well dealt with, it's a matter of self-confidence. Yes. Are we confident enough to take up this challenge? I mean, Marcus Garvey speaks about a race or a people who does not believe in self, twice defeated in the race of life. We have to take some risk, colleagues. We're asking people to be entrepreneurial. We as leaders must take some risk, expose ourselves, go out there and believe in what, speak for what we believe in, and give it leadership. I think
that is a great response. Thanks, Winston. And this question I want to shoot to Comrade Remy.
No problem.
Now, the question is being asked, is there a possibility of a joint small committee of the trade union movement and the credit union movement to identify a few concrete initiatives which could start a greater collaborative effort? And the person also asking, has this been done in the past? Because we realize it's the two sides of the coin. but is the same coin going into that machine of change? Is there room for a small committee to work together to identify concrete activity and greater collaboration for change? Yeah.
Colin, you know, if it wasn't a multiple choice exam, I'd have tick off yes one time. But it's more than that, right? Because yeah. I have tried to act as that fulcrum because I straddle leadership in both movements. We had attempted it in the past. I remember some years ago, myself and Comrade Vincent Cabrera, we started to have those discussions because ironically, Comrade Cabrera, when he was at the helm of BIGU, that union would have represented workers in the credit union movement. And he was a trade union leader representing workers in the credit union. And we were having challenges with negotiation with him and the movement. And then I was sitting as the president of the league. And it was a very uncomfortable thing when we were sitting in trade union leadership meetings. And he talking about the challenges he having with the management in credit unions. And we attempted to sit down and talk about how we could merge the leadership values in the both movements so we could bring about a different kind of synergy. And it would lead to what Winston is talking to. Trade unions have to have confidence because, you know, one of the things I see, Colin, and, you know, I have experienced it in my life in both the trade union and the credit union. When we mobilize workers to challenge the company in terms of anything with respect to their wages and conditions, they're very well mobilized. They're very well organized. But when you try to mobilize them to come to a credit union AGM is a bigger challenge, you know, because they see the two institutions as distinctly different. And that is where I think the education has to be critically important. We have to go back and re-educate them of the values of both movements, working in synergy to bring about a different kind of place. And I am all for that committee. I will try it again because in the little life I have remaining, you know, we have to continue, as Winston say, take the risk and do things differently. And I would want to throw out a challenge to the leadership in both movements that we have to do it. I keep advocating when I sit at NTAC that I am here as a representative of the trade union movement, but I will not hesitate to represent the interests of the credit union movement because they don't have a legitimate voice there. And I feel that the credit union movement, based on the economic mobilization that it could do, should have a voice at all those kind of policy development at a national level. But how do we get that? What should happen is there should be a partnership with the trade union movement, who has been recognized internationally as one of the partners in the tripartite process, to work closely with the credit union movement. So when they sit at that table of tripartism, they carry the views of both movements in synergy, working together. I think that is something that should be encouraged going forward into the future.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for that response. And I have a question here, and I wanted that directed to Hayden, because in your contribution, you spoke to the involvement of young people, and young people really questioning the relevance of the involvement in the movement at this time, you know, whether it makes sense. So a young person is asking, does it make sense for them to start a cooperative with other young people to make a positive impact in our community? They questioning the space of impact and the measure of impact of young people, seeing that, you know, it's a bit of a longer stretch, as you allude to. Speak to that matter.
Right.
Yes.
Colin, is just like what Comrade Remy was just saying, you know, we have to believe in ourselves. Comrade Remy and from young men, believed in themselves. They got themselves involved in the trade union movement, the credit union movement, and here they are today. Bona fide, legitimate leaders in their own right. Young people in the past never used to ask permission to do good for the community. They used to come together and they used to go out there and did what they had to do for their community. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
And that is the mindset that Comrade Remy and Fletcher, that's what they're talking about. It is the mindset. Can we change this through education? What is education today? This, what you're doing here, Colin, is education.
Yeah.
This is the education. It may not be in a physical building. It may not be in a classroom setting. This is what it is.
Yeah.
These you see, the college, the Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies,
Yeah.
should start thinking outside the box, and attendance and participation in webinars like this should count towards credits
Yeah.
for students. That you build courses around this kind of participatory discussion,
Mhm.
and people get credit for it, or it becomes
Yes.
part of their coursework mark or something to that effect. But what I'm saying is that there is an important re-engineering of the mindset that needs to happen.
Yes.
I think out of what has happened over the years, that there is a level of fear and greed
Yeah.
that prevent us from coming together collectively and working towards common objectives that benefit the entire society. Let me give you a small example.
All right.
In Trinidad and Tobago, we need to work assiduously on one important issue as far as our entire labor force is concerned. What exactly is a livable wage in this country? What is a livable wage under our current circumstances? Because we talk about a minimum wage, but I dare say nobody here would like to know that they have only reached that level of participation in the economy where the most they can earn is this $17.50 an hour minimum wage. Nobody will consider that any kind of achievement.
Yeah.
There isn't much difference between that and poverty.
Yeah.
Right?
And,
So what I'm saying, Colin, is that
yeah.
we are at a stage where I think one important thing, yes, the joint committee and so on,
Yeah.
to identify very specific strategic objectives and putting in place the correct strategies and so on, and moving the process forward where we can really achieve certain aspects of people empowerment. That's
Yeah.
good. But the second thing that needs to happen is that we expose the public to these kinds of discussions about the way forward outside of any political context.
Correct.
We talk about the nation and where the nation needs to go. Not about who's going to win the next election, but about where will Trinidad and Tobago be 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Let's have that discussion.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
That's the important point, okay?
Yes, fantastic point. And just two other things, I hear you talk about the college, and to be honest, the discussion at the college, I mean, Comrade Remy, he's speaking to it. For a while now, the discussion has been swinging into this direction, and the college is prepared to act as a conduit for that kind of committee, that joint committee to have a collaborative approach. And the next point here you have been making is that, attending these sorts of seminars for credit. And within certain programs at the college, we have a new and revised curriculum, which we launched at the beginning of this academic year, which actually awards credit for participation in these kind of forums, because we need to have these discussions, as you say, outside any political realm or any kind of realm of influence, and to have that. So, it's so important. Thanks so much for that contribution. And I know it's close to time, but there is one question I have to put on the table. And, asking all the presenters really to comment. And we'll start with Winston. And the question goes along these lines. I have been a part of the movement for over 20 years. And for the greater part of the last decade, I've been hearing about this entrepreneurial slant. I've been hearing about empowerment of people. I've been hearing about education, training, and information, and all these principles. However, at the college, when it comes to working people coming to be educated in labor, coming to be educated in cooperatives and credit unions coming to be educated in workers' empowerment, we still don't have the kind of response to get this movement of working people to the place they need to be. And that's just a microcosm of a wider societal issue. So the question is, what is missing in your opinion? What is the catalyst needed to take us in that direction? What for us to really engage in economic empowerment, social empowerment, people empowerment? What's the cement missing in bringing this together? And I really want to hear from all the presenters, starting with Winston. The floor is yours, sir. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for that. Excellent question. But I think that question is really moving us into the realm of practicality.
Yes.
We've been talking about a lot of good things, what needs to be done and articulating and so forth. But sometimes our rules are what constrains us.
Mm.
And as credit unions, we were set up to service members, as Brother Remy speak to, and not seeing them as shareholders, but as the individual members. So for example, credit unions, we are not so empowered by our rules to say, for example, lend to businesses. And a discussion that I have started back home in not very long ago is that credit unions, in order to move this towards this entrepreneurial class that I'm talking about, credit unions have to change their rules. They have to change their rules to start being able to service small and micro businesses. In the case of Jamaica, and it's probably across the globe, small and micro businesses account for 40 to 60% of most economies. If we are going to participate in that economic space,
the
rules as they are now cannot work. So we have to look at rule changes. That's a fundamental thing that we have to consider. And credit unions are hesitant in going that direction. I can tell you, some of the reasons are here. Boy, if we start looking like commercial banks, we may be taxed. My response to that is that if government wake up any Monday morning and wish to impose a tax on credit union, they're gonna do it.
Yeah.
We have made a sufficiently good case for government to make us tax exempt. We can still flourish and remain tax exempt. But I think we have to think big. We have to think of how we're gonna change the rules to allow us to go down that entrepreneurial path.
Yes.
I think that is what we need to do.
Fantastic. Mr. Remy, where that cement, where this cement, what we need to pull it together?
Colin, well, there are a myriad of things there, and one, I think Cipriani is poised. I would have tried when I was there for Cipriani to understand that they would have been the ideal vehicle to move this thing differently. I remember in a few graduation speeches I would have said that I will hate for the college to be another one of the degree factories that we have in Trinidad and Tobago. What we are seeing in tertiary education is a degree factory. And it's because of the mindset, and it goes back to your colonial mindset, you know. You will know that people would not want to say that I have a certificate from Cipriani, but they will prefer to say I have one from Atalog Jack because of what Atalog Jack may mean to them when they go in the institution for work. But Cipriani value and quality is much better. And then we have to start to link the output of the education system to the input of the workforce, the input of society. There's a huge gap. There's a huge gap between what comes out of the education system and what is required at the job site. So one, in the trade union movement, when workers come on the job, the trade union education that is given to them brings them to a different level. Two, in the credit union movement, when workers come into the job at the credit union, we have to re-educate them all along. And we have seen Cipriani is poised and sits on the right cusp to bring about that kind of transformation. And I am of the firm belief that we could bring it about. Winston talked about the issue of entrepreneurial development and the credit union's mindset. But in addition to that, we have a legislation that stymies credit union ability. And I believe that the laws have to be changed for credit unions to lend to businesses. We have to go through an archaic system of seeking approval from the Office of the Commissioner for Cooperative Development. Nothing is wrong with the office, but it's the law that puts us in that channel. And that is why we are saying we are for legislation change.
Yes.
And we need to change the Cooperative Societies Act.
Yes.
What we attempted to in the past was to bring a credit union bill that was going to corral us like banks. And we are saying, no, we are different to banks, but we would want to have that space to do what Winston is talking about. Can we lend to businesses? Can a business be a member of a credit union? Can a small business be a member of a credit union and not just the individual? So that when we lend to the business, we have the necessary checks and balances and the operational systems to ensure that we mitigate all the risks that are attendant when we lend to a small business. And not only that, that we provide the developmental work for the small business to take them from small to medium to large to the commanding heights of the economy. And that is the kind of transition we need to see in the credit union movement. We need to take somebody from a sole trader to somebody who now is part of the commanding heights of the economy. The legislation must give us that, and the education system. But as Winston said, the mindset of the leadership in the movement must be also changed to see that nothing is wrong in developing those people, but we have to keep educating them so they would not do what we call in the trade union movement. We say you have to commit class suicide to be part of the movement, you know. You have to be able to do that if you don't commit class suicide to be part, because some people don't see themselves as being part of the working class, you know.
Yeah.
If they move to that level, they feel they must jump out of the thing and go into a different class. So we have a class issue in the West Indian society that must be addressed and addressed very quickly. And I'm saying Cipriani has a critical role in bringing about that. And I would hope that Cipriani, to me, is the only educational institution right now in the country. We have a certificate institutions now who are given certificates on the basis of certain academic achievement, but are the people well educated to make a different kind of contribution to the society? And I would like to see Cipriani take the lead and be, not just in Trinidad and Tobago, but in the Caribbean region, that is working class education that will take us some small business sole traders to owning the commanding heights of the economy. And that is why I want to present my presentation this afternoon. Colin.
Excellent. Thank you, man. Listen, these time constraints, but I think we could go till midnight, you know, but, but I want to call Hayden in. Hayden, I know you raring to go and to identify missing links.
Colin, let me tell you.
Yeah.
If we're talking about education and the college itself, the college needs a bit of rebranding. Let me explain what I mean. The issue is really social and economic equity in these post-colonial societies. And you see, what the college has to be able to show is that its various programs, its courses, and so on, are built around the principle of social and economic equity. Simple rebranding. You see, what you don't want. You don't want the college to always be viewed as some center for socialist re-education. You with me?
Yeah, we here in here.
You want the college to be branded as an institution that enlightens the population and it encourages social and economic equity. It is built around people empowerment. People empowerment.
Yeah.
It is not an education of leftists. It is not about it is not about the mental engineering for leftists and socialists and so on.
Yeah.
What you want is an institution that is of 21st century vintage, speaking about empowerment of people, speaking to the issue of social and economic equity. And then of course, if we're talking about wealth creation, we're talking about entrepreneurship, then your body of knowledge must include the typical business management courses and so on.
Yes.
Look, we don't have to talk about profit maximization, but we do have to talk about the creation of surplus.
Yes.
Okay? And that is the rebranding that has to happen so
Yeah.
that the output of the college can be embraced by all employees. And you want to do the surveys as
Yeah,
Comrade Remy is saying, you need to marry the needs of the industries with the output of the college.
yeah,
So
yeah,
that kind of coordination, collaboration between industry and education has to be par for the course.
yes,
So forming the network with the various HR managers across the various multinationals, conglomerates, industrial estates, and so on, that is what has to happen at the level of the college so that they can better inform
yes,
the lecturers and so on in terms of what is the kind of delivery expected in these
yeah,
particular courses.
yeah.
That kind of development has to take place.
Excellent. And thank you so much, Hayden. And even today, in a meeting with the director of the college, he posited a question around the razor ditch of the of the college and the mandate of the college and getting that out to the public, our regional and local publics once more. And last week I was reading an interesting article about when President John F. Kennedy visited the NASA base while they were about to launch the Apollo spacecraft, and he encountered a janitor who was mopping the floor. And he asked the janitor, "What do you do here?" And the janitor responded, "I'm helping to put a man on the moon." So we now have to know where we position ourselves. And it's interesting that, all the presenters spoke to the role of Cipriani in that. So once again, we're preparing to put a man on the moon. We're preparing to empower people once more. And we really appreciate your contributions here this afternoon. Comrade Remy, Hayden, Winston, I think, it is a lot more bang for our buck we got here this evening. Yeah, I mean, this actually has caused another garden flower to blossom in terms of the direction we can take the two movements in terms of one valuable coin, as Comrade Remy spoke about, that gold coin, even though it might be a Bitcoin. But
It ain't no Bitcoin. It ain't no
it's not
Bitcoin.
a Bitcoin.
It's a Bitcoin, not Bit.
It's a
BIP.
Bitcoin.
It's a Bitcoin, not BIP.
So, even in terms of moving it forward, it's such a robust discussion, and I really want to thank you all, gentlemen. I know these the time constraints on these kinds of discussion is always an impeding factor, but I think keeping it clear, keeping it concise, keeping it succinct is also very important. So, gentlemen, I thank you for your presentations here this afternoon. All our participants, I thank you for joining us on this Friday evening, which prior to COVID, we would have been found somewhere in St. James or Peter Avenue or some of your favorite watering hole. But instead this afternoon, you're having a drink here with us. A drink of life, a drink in the cup of collaboration and empowerment.
Knowledge.
Yes, and of knowledge here this afternoon. So we really want to thank each and everyone for joining us here this evening. Don't forget to like the page. All right, share this discussion and continue to join us in our upcoming webinars. You will be informed as you are continually informed as we continue to empower, to fulfill our mandate, to empower the working people of the region. So thank you very much, gentlemen and participants. Do have a great weekend.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Yeah, it was a pleasure with you guys here, man.
Yes.
Take care.
Colin, we have work to do.
Yes.